webinar.
Good evening and welcome to the July 1st, 2021 Parks and Recreation regular video meeting. I am Jody McCarthy, Parks and Recreation Commission Chair. In accordance with Proclamation 20-28.10 and the Governor's Extended Safe Start Order, tonight's Parks and Recreation Commission meeting is using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The Zoom video of this meeting is being recorded and will be broadcast live via Zoom and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel later this evening. City staff, Jesse Bond, Ryan Daly, Jason Kintner, Katie Herzog, Council Member Liaison Jake Jacobson, and consultants Emily Moon, Gene Ackers, and Steve Dew are participating in tonight's meeting remotely. Other public audience members are listening to the meeting by telephone or via the internet. Welcome to all and thank you for joining us tonight. Commissioners, please turn on your microphones. Will the city staff please call the roll?
Chair McCarthy.
Here.
Vice Chair Struck.
Here.
Commissioner Cohen.
Here.
Commissioner Birkenwald. Commissioner Westberg.
Here.
Commissioner Markson. Thank you. And just as a reminder to the commission, we do still currently have one vacancy. And with that, I will pass it back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioners, before we start the business of tonight's meeting, I want to suggest a few rules to help the meeting run smoothly. If a commissioner has a question, please use the raise hand feature. I will do my best to recognize commissioners in the order in which hands are raised. Everyone will be asked to limit himself or herself to one question and to one clarifying question, if necessary, so that each commissioner has a chance to ask a question before a commissioner is given another chance to ask a question. Additionally, prior to speaking, please state your name for those listening in on our meeting. Tonight's agenda will not include in-person public appearances in accordance with Proclamation 20-28-11 and the Governor's Extended Safe Start Order. However, individuals wishing to speak live during the appearances portion of our meeting may do so by telephone or using the Zoom teleconferencing application, provided, however, they registered their desire to speak with the city admin staff by 4 p.m. today. Our city admin staff will call on you by name or telephone number when it is your turn to speak. Since we don't have anyone speaking today, I don't think we need to go through that whole thing. But please know that if you want to talk to us, you are welcome to our meetings. Okay, before we get started, we're going to move to the first item of business, which is to review and consider approving the minutes from the April 1st, 2021 meeting. Again, apologies. We're going to approve the minutes for the May 6th and the June 3rd, 2021 meetings. Can I have a motion to approve from the floor?
I so move. Commissioner Westberg.
John Cohen, second.
All right. There is a motion by Rory Westberg and a second by Don Cohen. Commissioners, please turn on your microphones. And will the city staff please conduct a roll call for the votes?
Chair McCarthy.
Aye.
Vice Chair Struck.
Aye.
Commissioner Cohen.
Aye.
Commissioner Westberg.
Aye.
With Commissioner Birkenwald and Markson absent.
Okay, motion passes and the minutes are approved. Okay, the second item of business is the PROS Plan Capital Project Prioritization Tool and Second Community Survey. We welcome City Manager Jesse Bond and consultant Steve Dew.
Thank you, Chair McCarthy. Very good to see all of you again. Happy July. I am actually going to turn the floor over to Steve Dew. We have really two items tonight, taking a look back at your prioritization criteria for capital projects, and then another look at the survey. So Steve, do you want to start with a capital prioritization tool?
Yeah, certainly. Good evening, commissioners. Glad to be back. And for the record, again, Steve Dew, Conservation Technique. As Jesse mentioned, priority for tonight is to review the prioritization matrix as well as the second community survey for the PROS plan. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Actually, before I do that, let me make a few comments. So in your packets, you have received the updated version of the prioritization memo and the matrix, which is the project list that now has ratings assigned to each project based on consultant and staff review. The intended purpose for the prioritization matrix really is a couple of things. One, it is intended to serve as a tool to help the commission and staff think about which projects are priorities and how they rate as priorities. It's I think fairly clear that there are a lot of needs in the Mercer Island Park system, and the community has expressed a lot of interests for different sorts of amenities or improvements. So with a list that can quickly grow to 20, 30, 40 projects, there is a need for a tool to help identify which sorts of projects move up or down in terms of relative priority, because budgets are fixed or limited, staff is limited, and timing and sequencing of projects is such that you have to apportion these out over time. So the purpose of the tool really is to give a level of information about each project based on the set of criteria we discussed last month to help inform how these projects compare against each other. So the matrix really is a way to help take that first step at looking at that master list of projects to see about prioritization, which will then turn into a more specific project list that will be part of the PROS plan, which is the capital improvement plan. So this is kind of an interim step, but it's an important interim step in that it, again, helps give information about the types of projects and how they're viewed against those different criteria. So the project matrix in its current form, again, is an interim product, and it may become part of the PROS plan proper. It might be in the appendix, but really it's a tool for the commission and staff at this point. So from here, there are a couple of questions that we just like some clarification on. One is, does it seem to make sense? Is the way that the projects have been ranked consistent with what you know about the system and the needs of the system? Two, are there things missing? Are there specific projects missing that you know that the community needs that aren't currently listed, because this is still in draft form? There may still be some additional projects to add, either through this discussion, through discussions with staff, or additional outreach with the community. And then I guess finally, does it feel like it's a useful tool to help make those informed decisions about capital improvement planning, and then translate that into ultimately direction on policy and goals for the PROS plan? So keep those things in mind. I'm going to share my screen. If I can get the right file up here, please hold. And let me confirm with some head nods. Can you see an Excel file? Okay. So this is the same file that you received in your packet. And this is just the working Excel version of it, so I can manipulate numbers if necessary to show how things change. But at the base, I just want to also show that this far right column is the summation of the scoring based on the criteria. Again, as we went through it last month, there's the specific set of criteria, and each criteria has a rating system, whether it's a 0, 1, 2 or a 0, 2, and then it has a weighting factor, and that weighting factor is the relative strength of that particular criteria compared to the others. So those two numbers there get combined to define what that total score is. So if any one project had the maximum score for each criteria, the highest score would be 32. So the closer the project gets scored to 32, the more the higher priority ranking it receives. So we also color coded this with a heat ramp, so you can very clearly see the gradation of priority based just simply on that color scheme. Secondly, the project list was then separated between projects that are kind of the traditional capital projects, as well as projects that are acquisition or just planning. And we wanted to just make distinctions between those groupings of projects. So with that, you can see these top 10 or so are the highest rated priority projects. And again, as a tool to inform capital planning, what this means is that these projects would likely be those that appear early in the project schedule for the capital plan. So those would be those projects that have earliest action, would occur earliest in time, or would preferably have dedicated dollars earlier than some of the lower priority projects. A second point is that when we get to the effort of having a full capital improvement plan put together in the PROS plan, it will likely include more projects than what the city can currently finance. And having projects in there that maybe aren't funded today or fundable today are still important to note, because a grant may come in, a donation may come in, a dedication may come in, where the city can then adjust the project list to accommodate those newfound resources. So again, the project list will likely be longer and potentially more shocking than what the city could afford today. But again, it's a way to identify priority and overall community need. So at this point, I just want to open it up for some questions or comments about the rating scale or the projects themselves to see, again, one, does the matrix make sense in terms of how it functions? Does it seem useful? And are there missing projects that you can think of? And I'll turn it back to the chair.
Commissioner Cohen.
Thank you, Don Cohen. These comments are in my order from when I reviewed this, so they don't necessarily go from top till bottom. Maybe I'm reading this wrong. I thought that environmental, and thank you for adding that in, it seemed lower than I would have expected, but maybe the answer is when you compare it to safety and budget and useful life, it's about where it could be. But I wondered about staff and consultants thinking about giving it the maximum that it has on there. And I've got a couple of others, but I can wait. That's my first one.
So to your question about environmental conditions, in terms of the weighting, yeah, it is just shown as a weighting of 1 at this stage. Again, it could be adjusted upward, but in relative consideration with the other criteria. It seemed as though having it listed and listed where it is seemed appropriate. And Jesse or Ryan, if you have other feedback to add, I'd appreciate that. No? Okay.
You know, sort of like this Don again, I'm sorry, my one follow-up, and sorry, city manager, like enhances environmental conditions is the same as unique feature. And maybe it's just because we're not talking about specific unique features, but to me, that seemed a little bit imbalanced, but.
And I would just add, we would welcome the feedback of the Parks and Rec Commission. If you'd like to change the weighting, we'd like to get that guidance from you this evening. When we come back to you in September, we're going to take this list, build it out just a little bit more, put cost estimates with the projects, and apply, you know, the final weighting tool that we agreed to tonight, so we can actually start focusing on confirming your recommendation for what will be a 10 to 20 year capital facilities list. So Commissioner Cohen, I would say if the commission wants to make an adjustment to that tonight, that would be absolutely, you know, we'd be seeking that feedback from you.
And in addition, since this is a working Excel file, I could simply change the number right now to see how that changes things, if that's of interest.
Go for it, Steve.
All right, so
I'd be interested in that, Don Cohen.
So raising it to a 2, which would put it equal to expanding opportunities. Made some modest adjustments here. The top 10 are still the same top 10. And then pushing it up to a 3, just to see what happens. Colored a couple of here around Mercer or Luther Burbank projects. But again, it's really making those that are near the top of the list more toward the top of the list. So again, it's just reinforcing those prior noted top 10, top 15. So does that help illustrate the changes?
Yeah, this is Don Cohen. Personally, I think I'd favor a 2 rather than a 1, but I don't know how any of the other commissioners feel about that.
This is Commissioner Westberg. I agreed with Don. When I read that, I thought that it sends a pretty peculiar message for us to say, based on weighting, that the impact on the operating budget is 3 times more important than the impact on the environment. And that to me just seemed like a message we didn't want to be sending as a commission on this. I think it's interesting, Steve, having gone through the number and changing the number to a 2 or a 3 doesn't really make a big difference in the project order, but it does strengthen the priorities. And to me, that's an important message to send. So I could live with it being a 3. I could certainly live with it being a 2 as well.
Agreed. I agree. I think 2 seems reasonable with that. Jody McCarthy.
Other comments or questions?
This is Peter Struck. I also have the same view that Commissioner Cohen and others have suggested regarding the environmental impact or conditions. And I think probably a 2, 3, I would probably lean a little bit more towards a 3. But if I could step back maybe more to the 50,000 foot level, the first question I have, and I have several, but I'll just start with one, is we've got this prioritization tool, which I think is great. I think it can be improved, of course, but it's great. The question I have to staff is, what other inputs do you have to actually creating the project budget? I mean, obviously you've got a capital budget that says, well, we only got X dollars to spend. I assume that would be part of it. Are there other things that would enter in here? Because I think about, for example, you know, when you have projects that have the same score on the prioritization tool, you know, quote unquote, how would you break that tie, for example?
I have a handful of thoughts for you, Vice Chair Struck. One is we're always trying to balance planning work and construction work. So, and we're also looking at, so Aubrey Davis Park right now, you've got a Lid A playground replacement and a Lid B playground replacement. There may be economies of scale at doing them both at once, or that could be a complete disaster because then you take out both playgrounds at once, right? So we talk about that. We'd look at, by the way, your list here, Jason Kittner and I were talking about this morning. Your playground infrastructure is in a little bit of trouble. You've probably noticed everything's aging out at about the same time. So we'd look at, you know, first of all, just timing, how many capital projects under construction at once can we handle? So we'd want to balance it out over, you know, the 6-year capital life. We want to look at geographic equity. Is everything loading up too much on the north end? And do we want to pick a project from lower on the list to balance it out on the city? We also really importantly want to look at grant opportunities. I think you're very familiar by now with the Luther Burbank Dock project. So that is scoring really high, but if it wasn't, we would probably still be advocating it for it to be high on our list because we know it's such a strong grant contender. And these aren't in any order of priority. I will also say public comment. We haven't done a public outreach yet with the capital list, but we do need to do that this fall. So you would also want to gather input from your community and say, you know, where are your priorities here? There's a couple projects that are really in their infancy right now that are tied to potential donations. I'm actually involved in a couple of them. So if a donor's come forward and said, I really want to get the Island Crest Park North infield replacement done, and I'm willing to pony up 50% of those costs, well, just like a grant, we might elevate it because we've got revenue coming in. So when we sit down in the fall, we'll have, you'll want to have the conversation with the community. What are your priorities? We'll be able to mark on this list the projects that are grant eligible or contenders anyway. And we'll also start to do some mapping, at least preliminarily, although you know where all these parks are. So that just off the top of my head, those are some things that I would throw out there for consideration.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Because when I look at the list, I mean, just kind of from the math, because the safety, you know, has a weight of 6. I mean, all your safety projects kind of float to the top. And so one of the questions I was kind of thinking about is, given that we have constrained resources, will some of the projects kind of that are not safety related or don't score high on the safety criteria, will they ever get done?
I will tell you that. So that is a fantastic question. Steve and I actually had this conversation just a few hours ago. What you're seeing is and you all know this because we've been spending time with you looking at your conditions of your park system. You have an aging park system, and we're faced with a dilemma here because there's some desires, for example, for new infrastructure. And what Steve and I were wrestling with today is, I don't know how that work ever gets funded when you have this much backlog. And that's probably where your conversation as a commission will go this fall. But you know, these safety scores are legitimate. With playground equipment, we don't push the envelope a whole lot. for obvious reasons. So yeah, Vice Chair Struck, you're hitting a good point. I think you all will be working with us on some policies around this, and then you may have to be intentional about making space and carving out some funding for new stuff, because otherwise, yeah, I'm not sure I really answered your question. I just validated that what you're seeing is as well.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to make, understand that I was on the right, on the kind of on the,
Yeah.
moving on the
Yeah.
right path, and you just echoed that, so thank you.
Well, and think about too, I'm going to use the splash pad, spray pad, because that's coming up in public comment that people want a feature like that in our park system. And it frankly, it would get some points for, expanding opportunities, but otherwise it doesn't score really well using a matrix like this. But you've had public comment, and I would say it's been pretty strong. So we would look at a project like that and ask ourselves, how could we possibly get that done? Donations, maybe we come up with we say this has to be funded 50% through donations. We're going to put it into the 6-year capital plan, and it's got to be community driven. You have a levy renewal that's coming up. We haven't talked about that yet. That's another place for a project like that. So we have some knobs that you would consider turning in your advisory capacity to the council. So this is a good time to be thinking about those, because definitely you've got some system maintenance backlog here that's significant.
Okay, Commissioner Westberg has a question. You're on mute, Rory.
Are you still looking for general comments about criteria of the project list?
Yes, please.
Okay. So as far as the criteria, you have a criteria on the list that says expanding opportunities. No, I'm sorry, it's the one above that. It's extending useful life, enhancing level of service, which are kind of two different ideas. And the description of them even uses the word or, not and. So it's two different ideas there. And yet the rating definitions don't really address at all enhancing level of service. All it addresses is whether it extends the life of the amenity. So there's an important point there that's left out of the rating in the rating definitions and in the rating numbers. So I suggest either split that criteria into and treat each of those separately, or figure out a way to adjust the ratings to consider both the points that criteria is trying to cover. So that's one comment. We already talked about the environmental issue. Under the land acquisition projects, I was just curious how those were selected. What is the source of those particular projects? And in particular, why under trail connections was there not a score for impact on the budget or even potentially safety or liability?
I might need to look to Jason Kittner. The first 3 projects are fairly specific, or the first 3 items in our land acquisition are fairly specific, and they tie back to previous work that's been done in those areas. That 4th item, Commissioner Westberg, trail connections and open space habitat additions, I was actually tempted to delete it because it's some items on this list in its original form are just very generic, and they're problematic to score because they're not specific enough. I left it in there just as a placeholder to say, hey, we will be looking at trail connections and open space habitat additions, but we're gonna have to get more specific about where they are to actually be able to rank them. So that one maybe should have been taken off.
Okay, I was just curious about
Yeah,
that.
Jason, do you have more of the history on the three, if you're here, those 3 land acquisition items?
No, I'm here. I don't have anything further on it. And your summary of how we got to where we are on was perfect. We had the same thought on the trail connections and open space habitat additions. You know, depending on where they're at, some of them can be very small, some of them can be large. It just sort of depends on the specific project. And so there wasn't enough detail to really pinpoint that in this matrix.
So Commissioner Westberg and for the rest of the commission here this evening, what I'm actually going to recommend with land acquisition is something different. I left these on because they've obviously have some history. I think what we need to do, provided there's policy support, is start setting aside money in for parks, trails, open space acquisition. And we also need to develop a citywide land acquisition strategy. That is not typically done in public. That's usually something that cities do, and it's kept confidential. And the reason is, you know, Commissioner McCarthy, if your house was next to a park and we knew that we wanted to expand that park property and we showed that we were going to try to buy your house, you may not take kindly to that, but that's sometimes how the land acquisition strategies come about. So my inclination, and I've been talking with the staff about this, is to include in our goals of the PROS plan, you know, some goals around land acquisition priorities, and that we need to develop that land acquisition strategy. And so this list may just drop off altogether.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. And then I have just one final comment, and it could be included, but as far as the project list goes, I didn't see anything for Clark Beach dock repair or replacement. Is that subsumed under the shoreline item?
Clark
Or-
Beach, yeah.
I mean, that
Yeah.
dock's a mess. It's
We have a little bit of a chicken and egg problem with Clark Beach. When I went back and reviewed the ratings, I actually changed them all to 2s for Clark Beach, the master plan, because we have issues with that property all over the place. And you've also heard through public comment the opportunity, a lot of support for doing something with Clark Beach. So the problem is, without a master plan or some sort of guiding document explaining what's going to happen there, that we don't have the specific projects laid out. If I asked all 4 of you, you'd probably all have different ideas. So if Steve, you scroll up, so the master plan ranked really high. If you scroll up, there is a Clark Beach, there it is. It's desperately in need of ADA improvements, but again, and we went ahead and ranked them. Again, and Jason and Steve and I have been talking about this. Do you do those improvements, or do you do the master plan first and lay out the whole vision for the property and then go back and start doing the improvements? I'd actually argue for efficiency, and given the needs at that park, you probably want to step back and do a planning process. And Commissioner Westberg, you're pointing out a very important conversation that we need to have in the fall. This is just my opinion on how to approach Clark Beach. You know, we're going to be looking to you to provide a recommendation to the council of what comes first. Do you do a planning process first? Do we want to just go ahead and try to fix some things because it's in not great condition? And then Steve, scroll down again. I want to point out one other thing. In the park planning section, being an island and having such wonderful waterfront properties, we have the need to do the overwater structures plan, which is how we steward and manage all of our beaches, all of our docks. So Clark Beach could also roll up just into that plan. So we have some options on how to approach Clark Beach, but thank you for raising that.
I'm just going to use my follow-up comment. Thanks for that explanation. And I would just say that personally, I would favor doing the master plan first as well. So I was a little confused because there were specific projects on this list, but there was also the master plan. And I think the master plan is the chicken that has to come before the egg.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's have Commissioner Markson.
Hi, sorry, it took me a while to get onto the Zoom call appropriately. I was an attendee for a while, first of all. I had a question about the safety and security part of the ranking. And here it says safety and liability. I think in the upper or in the other attachment, it says safety and security.
Mhm.
Is security actually, I guess when I think of security, I think of like police or something like that. I was curious if I had the right interpretation and if security, or what was meant by security, or if it really means liability.
Fair question. And in the memo, it does say safety and security. And I think the intent is about safety and liability, where you have amenities that are either today or could be in the near future liability concerns.
Okay. And like, is the liability, or how is the liability determined?
Well, for example, with playground structures, we know the age of all of the different playgrounds in the parks. So typically, a useful life for a playground is between 20 and 25 years. So knowing the age and knowing its current condition informs whether it should be rated as a higher safety concern rather than a lower safety concern.
Okay.
Steve, if I may, just to add on to that. So Jason Kidner, Chief of Operations. So our parks maintenance crews in particular are performing routine inspections and documenting those inspections in our CityWorks or asset management system. And oftentimes, like as Steve is mentioning, playgrounds, those inspections lead to degrading materials, things that start to indicate that this equipment is nearing the end of its useful life and time for replacement. And we take that data in conjunction with the overall picture of the structure and start to look towards a replacement rather than just doing like individual replacement pieces along the way. So the asset management tool is a pretty important tool for our crews and our capital reinvestment needs moving forward as well.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. I think similar to what Ms. Bond said, I noticed that there were so many playground structures, and I was wondering the same thing. Would you end up in this cycle of simply just replacing playground structures if you only take into account safety and liability, or really stuck on that track? And a couple of things I was going to bring up. I really like the idea of the geographic equity, because a lot of the projects I think in the list are on the north end, which I could see that seeming, well, I didn't look at the map fully. I know Clark Beach obviously on the south end, but some of the playgrounds I'm not sure where they are, but it seemed pretty north end heavy. And I had one other question. Or maybe it was just a comment that I also like the idea of, oh, I know what it was. Okay, the operating budget impact item. So does that mean it's not like how much your budget is next year and your ability to capital improve, pay for the capital improvements, but you're saying I'm maintaining it afterwards? Is that what that operating budget impact means?
That's correct. So if an improvement, let me pick an example. Like the Luther Burbank Park tennis courts are kind of been a problem. We do a lot of maintenance and babysitting of them. So if you think about, we're spending money to maintain them, and if an improvement decreases our operating costs through staff hours, time, materials, whatever it might be, a decrease in operating budget scores a 2, right? Because that's what we want.
Okay.
If it's nominal, there's no material change, so it keeps it about, you know, less than 5% impact, then it's a 1. If it's increasing our operating budget, so if we added something new like a spray park, that would definitely increase our operating budget. So that gets a 0. So think about it. It's kind of an inverse way of thinking about it. We're trying to identify here these improvements that will actually bring down the day-to-day maintenance, and they get a higher score because they help us out on the other
Right.
side of the equation.
Okay. Okay, thanks. That's all my questions. I was, so if you could just let me know maybe how it works if we do decide to change a weighting factor, would we discuss it and then?
Yeah, well, let's.
Sorry. Okay.
That's a good, Chair McCarthy, if you don't mind, I think that's a good segue. So what we want to do tonight, and again, I want to reassure you that this is just a tool. You all will be asked this fall to make a final recommendation on how these projects get prioritized. So what we want to leave here tonight with is, you know, an agreement on how these items are weighted. And I heard, I think I heard support to change the environment to a 2 factor, but possibly even a 3. So I need to get clarification on that. And then I'm sorry, I wasn't typing fast enough in my notes. Commissioner Vice Chair Struck, it might have been, did somebody else recommend possibly changing extends useful life or operating budget down? I may have missed that.
If I could jump in, it was a comment about potentially splitting, extending useful life and level of service, or clarifying how it's applied.
Got it.
And this is Commissioner Stuck, if I could just tag onto that, that issue, because the last version of this document from last month, there was 2 categories: extending useful life, and then there was an enhancing level of service intensity of use element. And I think the commission decided let's combine those. However, as was pointed out by Commissioner Westberg, the rating definitions didn't change at all. So that there needs to be more work there, I guess is the best way to put it.
And are we comfortable with that category then? Split, extending useful life, enhancing level of service as combined, and with the weighting factor that's there?
Yeah, I think I'm comfortable with that, or just adjusting the weighting factors, the language of the weighting factors to address both of those criteria somehow.
Okay.
I don't know how, but that's why Steve makes the big bucks.
So that would raise it so that's closer to the safety and liability. Is that what you're thinking, Rory?
No, I'm not saying changing the weighting necessarily. I'm saying that the description of the criteria measures that are applied needs to address both issues.
So the definitions in the memo that correspond with the matrix be revised. We can make that change.
Correct.
Commissioner Struck, did you have another question about this?
No, I've got other questions, but I'll defer to others and come back in.
Commissioner Cohen?
I've got a lot of questions, but first, my comments. I would go to a 3 on environmental. I just suggested a 2 so as not to be overreaching, but after hearing some of the other comments, I would go with a 3 on that one. I would go, the city manager asked about the master plan for Clark Beach being first or later. I would agree with the other people who said they do the master plan first rather than piecemeal projects. Third thing, I agree with the city manager that should exercise some discretion on what you put into something like this about the land acquisition. I mean, she knows that you can even have executive sessions regarding land acquisition. So it's interesting, but perhaps not prudent. Let's see, a couple of new things. The Pioneer Park bike trail path lighting. I know we have briefly commented on that over the years, and at least when I was on the Open Space Conservancy Trust, it was discussed a number of times, and some people were opposed to that for mostly environmental reasons relating to birds, invertebrates, and things like that. So where'd that come from?
That project is in the current capital improvement plan, and it's a carry forward. And there was also, I believe, some limited public comment about trail lighting and safety within Pioneer Park.
Yeah, because to me, that, at least for some people, is a pretty, a medium divisive thing. And I don't know when the capital, where it came from. I don't know when that was put in there. And I don't know whether the Open Space Conservancy Trust, after I got off it, discussed that anymore. Rory would know that, but that jumped out at me because it isn't something we've talked about here more than about 2 minutes. And I don't personally favor it without a lot more analysis and thinking about it. And I don't remember, I guess I didn't participate in in how it got on the capital improvement budget. So that's one thing. The geographic equity, the last time we talked about that, the people who were at the meeting, I think, were less cool on that being an important factor than Sarah's comment or the city manager's comments tonight. Some people expressed, if it's at the north end, that's fine. We don't need more density of traffic down at the south end, even though it might be more convenient, certain kinds of things. So I'm not sure that we've captured that sentiment, if that continues to be a sentiment.
Mayor Cohen, if I could follow up on that, when I was mentioning geographic equity, it was really in terms of we took it out, right? It's not in your prioritization any longer. But when we get to the fall and you were actually looking at how to take these projects and lay them out over a 6-year period, it is something that you might want to look at. That it was just a suggestion, as the commission is, going to be asked to make recommendations.
Okay.
So that was all.
That's fair enough. Can I, Jody, may I keep going? I just got 2 other short ones.
If they're very quick.
Okay. I've raised this before, and if somebody at the staff can tell me that this is impossible, so it isn't worth looking into, that's fine. And that is there any way to increase the accessibility for fishing at Groveland that was destroyed by the breakwaters? If there isn't, then I'll be quiet about that. But somebody, somebody needs to say more to me if they would agree to, then, that would be pretty tough. If it can't be done, but anyway, so that was the Groveland thing. The other, let's see, the other thing, geographic equity we talked about. Oh, one thing from the memo, Steve, on page 2 and 3 of the memo, there is a grouping of lower significance bullets and mediums and things like that. And it struck me that some of the lower significant bullets, to the extent that the memo is going to become a biblical kind of document in this, some of the lower significant bullets didn't seem so different from some of the mediums. And I don't know whether that was intentional. I assume it's intentional, or what effect that might be. If the chair is so inclined and you want to go back to that, I can tell you which ones I was thinking of, but I don't have it in front of me right now. those are my comments remaining on that.
Thanks for the feedback. And Chair, may I make one quick comment on that memo?
Of course.
So just in response to the higher and medium significance, the memo is really initially intended as a primer for the commission to think about how to craft this matrix. So going forward, I would suggest that it really is just the criteria and the criteria descriptions that are maintained, whether it's for internal documentation or for planning purposes at the commissioner staff level. So kind of that last page of that memo is really the most important piece of the memo. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Commissioner Struck has some comments.
Yes, thank you, Peter Struck. First, regarding the weight on the enhanced environmental conditions, Chair, we might want to just do a thumbs up to kind of see where we land. Is it 2 versus 3? I would follow Commissioner Cohen and support a 3. Secondly, you know, as I look overall at this table and the criteria and so forth, you know, everything is pretty squished together. And I was thinking about, well, how can you create, let's say, a more wider range of scores, if you will, to kind of make your decision making perhaps a little bit, your guidance a little bit easier. And one thought I had was on the rating scale, if you were to say, and I don't know if you can do this on, I don't think you do it on every criteria, but if you, you know, rather than 0, 1, 2, you know, have, you know, 0, 1, 2, 3 or 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. All of a sudden that, you know, the potential score can, you know, go higher and things like that. So that's just a thought that, you know, you can think about. And then lastly, in terms of projects, and again, I'm not really 100% clear on this, but, and I know the city manager, I believe, is aware of this, but there is several community members that have expressed an interest in looking to reclaim at the recycling center in Mercer Park some of that asphalt pad, and either expanding the native garden or putting some other kind of natural amenity in there. And I know that if we wait to the fall and we wait for community input, I'm almost guaranteed it'll show up there. So we might want to think about that one. And I know that it may have to be combined with other things that are happening, you know, in terms of projects at Mercerdale, but I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Sure. So if I may, I really love the discussion. You're raising potential project ideas. We'll need to get those, that feedback from you probably at the September meeting, add to this list, see if there's support, you know, to add it. We'll go through that whole exercise. So keep thinking about the projects that aren't showing up here that you'd like to be considered. I did, Commissioner Cohen, you asked about Pioneer Park path lighting. I'm reading a note here that says it's been in the CIP for many years. It was carried forward when the trust board gave support for it. It was also, though, put into the CIP with the caveat that there was going to have to be community fundraising to pay for it. So we don't have to get into the specifics of all these projects now, but that is something to consider going forward. Is sometimes a project, if somebody wants it and it's not scoring high, then it may need to have, you know, fundraising or something else associated with it. So if you have any more questions about that, I think Paul West is here and he has the background.
Well, this is Don Cohen. It was first raised by the conservative or Orthodox Jewish community, people walking to services on Friday night at certain times of the year, which was a reasonable and a compelling sort of reason for it. But then it got into, like you say, into cost and potential impacts on wildlife. So thank you, though.
Yep.
All right, so I think we're gonna wrap up our second item, but before we go to our third item, I would like to recognize and welcome Commissioner Markson to the Parks and Recreation Commission. At the June meeting, we had some technical difficulties and didn't get the proper opportunity. And so Commissioner Markson, would you like to share a little bit about why you were willing to join the commission and what's your favorite element of the Mercer Island Parks system?
Sure, thanks. And sorry about that. I use WebEx at work all the time, but somehow Zoom is not on my normal app usage. So anyway, I'm Sarah Markson, and I've lived on Mercer Island for about 11 years. And I'm excited to be on the commission. And I guess when I decided to apply to be a commissioner, it was simply because I've benefited from the parks for a long time as my kids have gotten older. And, you know, from the playgrounds to the beaches, to the, of course, the ball fields and the Parks and Recreation Center. So anyway, I'm just excited to be able to give back and hopefully represent what I hope is a kind of a diverse perspective. My favorite part of the parks personally is probably Pioneer Park and all the wooded areas, to be honest, is probably the ones that I use the most as I run or walk my dog. But I probably spend more time at the ball fields. That's just the life of a parent of kids, right? As a parent.
I feel that.
Anyway, look forward to working with you all.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's go to our third item of business, which is the Recreation Reset Update. And we're going to welcome Operations Transition Team Manager, Ryan Daly.
I'm going to pause for a second. We did have a couple more items that to cover under the previous agenda items. So I'm going to pass it back to Jesse. But before I do that, Sarah, welcome. So excited to have you on the commission, and appreciate all of the time you're dedicating now, and I'm sure the other commissioners are filling your ears with the additional dedication you're going to show. So thank you again, sincerely.
Well, let's see if we can bring this item home. Apologies, Chair McCarthy. So I was not able to see the screen. It sounded like there was thumbs up to change the environmental weight to 3. Was that yes from everyone? Okay, we got that. We've captured your notes on specific projects. We'll bring that forward to September. We need to add the extend useful life, extends level of service explanation. Otherwise, I think Steve and I are hearing the weighting and the scoring is okay, go forth. All right, so one other item then is that survey. We are running a second community survey. We presented it to you last time. We've now got it formatted. We've made quite a few changes. I'll have Steve pull it up real quick. And if there's any additional comments, suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. And then we will be out of your hair.
So yes, again, sorry for the confusion with the double items within one agenda item. So as Jesse mentioned, the survey that we discussed last month has been now formatted for a print mail version survey. So we were considering approaching this survey like we did the survey in early 2020, where we do a statistical mail out print version to a random sample of households, but also have the same survey available online for the broader community. So to do that, we wanted to make sure we could get all the questions in there to fit the format for a mail survey. So that's why it looks a little different, it looks a little more clean. It's not quite 100% finished, but the questions themselves have been formatted and cleaned up based on the prior conversation. The survey was included in your packet. So there were the edits that we discussed from last month that have been addressed, and looks like this now, as you can see from your packet. But questions 8 and 9, we're still toying with additional line items. So for question 8, one additional line item would be for computers, gaming, and esports, to add that as a recreation program element to see how that weights within the community. And for question 9, that deals with aquatics, asking about rowing and crew programs. So those haven't been incorporated into the version that you have in your packet, but at this point, looking to see if the commission has any other comments or questions on the survey design or what's put forward. We'd like to be in a place where we can potentially launch the survey in the community probably toward the end of August. So it would likely be before the next September session of the commission. Anything I'm missing, Jesse?
Nope, you got it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Commissioner Westberg?
Thanks. And I don't, I'm sorry, I don't recall what the edits were that we discussed specifically last time pertaining to number 4, but I just have I have a problem. I think I understand what we're trying to do there, but I have a problem with the way that question is worded, because it says prioritize more, less, or maintain the current priority as the right amount. And a priority isn't an amount. It's not a quantity of something. So it seems to me that with that question, what we're trying to address is the difficult idea that you have to make choices. You have to make difficult choices about how you allocate limited resources to maintain park amenities. So the question in my mind you're asking here is, do you think the city should, whether you think the city should allocate more, less, or maintain the current level of support for the indicated facility? Prioritize is not the right word there in my judgment.
Commissioner Westberg, the previous draft actually used the word spend. Spend more, right amount of spending, or spend less. And the feedback we got at the last meeting was, well, the community doesn't know how much we spend, so change it to prioritize.
But they don't know how we prioritize either.
Well, and this is a perception question, really.
Right.
We expect the community to know how much we spend. So we're open to the commission's feedback on this. We can put it back to the way it was. Open to other feedback with fresh eyes. Steve and I have been staring at this thing.
Oh, I'm sure you have.
One other way to frame it is offer more, offer less, or maintain current offering. So it's like people could visualize these things at least if they don't know how much is spent or prioritized.
Yeah, that's a good, I think that strikes me as a reasonable compromise. Should we offer more of this? Because that implies prioritizing.
Yep.
Because as a person filling out the survey, they know it's being offered now. All of these things they're all available. The question is, do you want to see more? Do you want to see less? Or is it about right?
Okay.
And then I had a question or comment on 8 and 9, but I don't know whether you want to wait and see if there's any other comments.
I would love to get, if you don't mind, Steve and Chair McCarthy, with your permission, is there consensus to change that to the offer more, offer less?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the offer more, only because I'm picturing like offer more natural areas or open space, for example. That sounds like it's only increasing the amount of area, you know what I mean? Like it works for some, like offer more trails. I think we are saying, like, I mean, we are talking about spending money. Like if I probably would have said spending, but that was already discarded. But I'm worried about people just thinking when you say offer more, that you're talking about increasing from the space that exists now, which I don't think is what you're saying, right? You're saying just prioritize your support of it, or
Right.
increase your support, right?
And we didn't, so let's take the first one, natural areas, open space. You know, prioritize more could be a greater investment in maintaining those areas, but it could actually be making
It
more
could also,
space areas. It's a little open-ended, which I hope helps you all in, you know, having some flexibility to decide how to interpret this data. But this question really ties right back to the discussion we just had on capital. So you should ask yourself, you know, depending on the outcome of this survey question, it really will inform finalizing your capital project recommendation.
How about put more emphasis on? Does that give more flexibility? Cover Rory's comment and Sarah's and city managers? This is Don Cohen, sorry.
yeah, I like that one better than offer more, personally. This is Sarah Markson.
Rory, what do you think about the other choices?
Well, the language, I think any of those are better than prioritize. But I'd come up with the language of, just as another suggestion, of should the city allocate more, less, or maintain the current level of support for the indicated facility or amenity? Support implies spending, but it's not specifically that. And that could address, as far as open space, that could address a lot of things. I mean, it could address budgets, it could address expanding the footprint of open space. So.
Can you say that again, Rory, please?
Please indicate whether you think the city should allocate more, less, or maintain the current level of support for the indicated facility.
Rory, this is Don. The use of allocate and support to me sounds like you're just talking about money, which, you know, I don't think you are. Support's okay. I was looking for something, you know, that was not prioritized, but didn't have such a, you know, a focus on monetary issues alone. But
yeah, well, support comes in a variety of forms, but yeah, I mean, essentially it does boil down to money.
Mm-hmm.
I could jump in. One option, one variation would be just simply increase support, maintain current, and less or reduce support, something along that lines.
Yeah.
How do people feel about that? Rory's giving it a thumbs up. Peter?
Don, could you say your suggestion again?
oh, well, my problem with Steve's is that it's saying money to me again only. But let's see. For you to please indicate whether you think the city of Mercer Island should focus its emphasis more, less, or I mean, it's not working out, you know, semantically here, but I was talking about emphasis. I'd be okay with support depending on what the other words are.
Yeah, I think I like support rather than emphasis as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Sarah, are you good with support?
Yes, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we have a consensus for support instead of prioritize.
Thank you.
Are there other comments changes with any of the other questions? Happy to run through those.
Commissioner Struck has his hand up.
Yes, thank you. This really is just about question order. I think questions 1, 3, and 10 all relate to usage of in the parks. And so I think those should be grouped together so people they're kind of thinking about usage all at the same time. And then secondly, I believe that questions 8 and 9, which again kind of get to ranking of various activities and so forth, should follow question 5. And that quick questions 6 and 7, which are about the issue of park expansion, should be, I guess, maybe move behind 8 and 9, so that you're getting a more logical sequence, because right now these things kind of jump all over.
We may need you to run through those requests one more time. And
Sure.
I tell you that this was put together like a jigsaw puzzle to make it fit.
Yeah, well, and again, you know, if the the pragmatic issue of fitting things in, you know, doesn't work, it doesn't work. But questions 1, 3, and 10 are all about usage of parks.
Yep.
And I think that they should be grouped together if possible.
Okay.
And then secondly, questions 8 and 9, which are big tables on activities, if they could follow question 5, or put another way, moving questions 6 and 7, you know, after question 9. Again, because you're kind of the question 6 and 7 about park expansion kind of just falls in the middle of all this stuff about asking about activities, and it's kind of really a separate issue.
I can see what I can do. It is a spacing issue, though.
We will be happy to work on it and see.
Yeah, I think that's all you can do.
Yep.
And then if I may, Chair, I've got, you know, in terms of wording on questions 8 and 9. Let me see here. Yeah, so in both questions, it says, for your household, please indicate your interest in the following. My you know, when I think about the word interest, you know, again, it's really what we're trying to get is gauging, you know, what, you know, how much how much usage are we going to have here? And so a slight wording change would be to say, please indicate your interest in participating in the following. So it's a little bit more active, because I mean, I could be interested in a lot of things, but I have the likelihood of me actually doing anything is probably very little.
Fair.
That's easy fix.
Commissioner Westberg, do you still have some comments?
Just Peter picked up on the exact comment I wanted to make on those two questions, is that we needed to somehow frame that more than just general interest, I think, to get a better response. And I like his idea.
Okay.
And if I may, Chair, I have one other suggested wording change on question 11, where currently it's a word of the city of Mercer Island is exploring options, quote, to enhance revenue generation, unquote. I would change that to enhance revenue generation, bureaucratic wording, to just say it's exploring options to increase revenues. People don't talk, you know, increase revenue generation or enhance.
Yeah, that's a good change. Thank you.
I'm done.
Thank you, Peter. All right, does anybody have any more questions or comments about the survey?
Yeah, this is Don Cohen. I do. Maybe I had my wrong button pressed here. May I, Jody?
Of course, yep.
Don Cohen. On that question 11, where you talk about potentially charging fees for banners at sport courts and fields. Maybe there's not room to add something, but would you want to learn how people felt about selling naming rights to certain things like the Rory Westberg splash pad or something like that? I mean, I at some point I'd be interested in that, but maybe that's something that is part of a larger issue for the city to deal with. That was one question I had, or one suggested thing to think about. The other thing I do want to talk about is I'm uncomfortable with having the survey go out in mid to late August or late August and be just have a 3-week period then with the beginning of school, with the first real post-COVID school sort of stuff. I'm uncomfortable that we're going to be in the situation that that the city has been in so many times of the timing of it not being consistent with getting the biggest return on the surveys. Whether that is right or not, that seems to me a likely perception by some people.
Two quick, going back to your comment, we did add, Commissioner Cohen, the last one, maybe we just need to reframe it. It says sell limited term 5 to 10 years naming rights at park facilities.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't see that. Sorry. Thank you.
That's okay. Nope, that's okay. We did put the limited term because. Yeah. And the survey timing, it's a bit of a beast. We need to get your data back so that you can really be making final recommendations in October or November. And we're running up against a deadline. And so Steve and I talked, your return rate on your last survey was incredibly high. And that's a great sign. We thought if we opened it in August and kept it open longer, we could possibly get make sure we get the right return. We keep it open until we meet a certain return. I'm not sure that delaying it is an option to keep us on schedule. We could run it in August. That didn't seem like the best timing with everyone on vacation. After tonight, the survey will be ready to go. So I'll be honest, Steve and I felt like if we launched it in the summer, we were also going to get criticism. So open to your feedback.
This is Jody McCarthy here. I do think that is a bit of a rock and a hard place. I like the idea of keeping it open longer. I will say, to the point of school starting, families are in the mode of filling things out at that time. So they might be motivated to include that in all of the pieces of paper that they have to fill out for all the things that go on at school. So if there was some way that we could get it sent out to the PTAs for all of the schools, that might be a good way to get some support and get some awareness for it with families, since they're doing a lot of sending things out at that time. And just try and make it as easy as possible for people to access it and fill it out quickly. Thank you.
Steve, what was the number of surveys we had to get back for the statistically valid part of the last survey? 400 something?
Actually, 300 is minimal. And I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but I'm guessing we were close to 5 or 550 on the mail survey last time. We were just over 20%, 22%. So I think we were just over 500 returns on 2,500 out.
One other thing that I was just thinking is with all of the people that are doing the programs at the community center for the camps, that might be a good opportunity to try and get some in front of those people so they can fill it out. That's my last comment. And Commissioner Struck has a comment.
Yes, thank you. I guess I overall agree with Commissioner Cohen's initial comment about the summertime. So Steve, just in terms of kind of, so we're going to run basically 2 surveys. We're going to have the written or randomly selected mailed survey, and then we'll just have kind of call it the public survey where people can go online and we'll have kind of two panels of surveys. And so, you know, the kind of the public survey, clearly, you know, getting that out as soon as possible, then just keeping it open and, you know, trying to build enthusiasm and interest in it makes sense. But how I'm thinking about, you know, kind of coordinating the two. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, good question. Typically, we want to push out the random sample print version first.
Right.
To let those folks get the first dibs at taking the survey. So if we were to push out the online only version, there is a chance that someone will have already taken that who would likely receive the print version.
Right.
So it reduces our sample. So
yeah, that's kind of where I was going. Yes.
Yeah. So our preference is to push out the mail versions first and have about a 5 to 7 day delay before starting to really push and promote the online version. The online version will be set up and identical in many ways and ready to go at the same time, but we just delay the promotion of it.
And at this point, kind of what's kind of the drop dead date on, you know, the term, you know, what do you got to kind of say we can't go any further into the fall?
Yeah, so Jesse mentioned the overall project timeline, and if we back up a little bit from there, it'll give you a sense of kind of that rock and hard place that we're working in. So if we need to have a substantially developed commission blessed plan, let's say by Thanksgiving, so it can then go through the process of planning commission and city council to get approved, you know, early next year. That's really the latest. But backing up from that, we need to have the data to develop the capital facility plan, to revise any content and priorities from the survey in the plan document. So that's about a month or so. So right now we're at the middle of October to just incorporate the data that we've collected, but then we have to also account for analyzing the data and digesting the data. So backing up from that, we're in late September at the very latest. And if we push out a mail survey, our experience has been it's about a 3-week window where we captured 90% of the returns from the print version. There's a big push on the first 10 days. We do a follow-up postcard, we get another big push. But after about 3 weeks, it really tapers. So even if we're talking about keeping the survey active only for 3 weeks, we're still looking at late August or very first week of September to push this out to make sure we've got enough time to actually use the data.
Okay, that's very helpful. I guess my initial reaction would be to, you know, push the mail survey out, you know, I'll call it late August, and then, you know, have the online, you know, probably hit right after, you know, the later, a week later or whatever, and, you know, run it till September 25th or whenever you can do it. And I think we'll just have, and use this time to try to create a robust communication and plan. And like Commissioner McCarthy said, if, you know, let's identify as many groups. I'm sure you've already done this. So, and alerting them that it's coming.
All right, are we all done on the survey now? Okay,
Yes.
I'm going to suggest that before we do our third item that we take a short break. So it's so let's come back at 7:04. Does that work for everybody?
Yep.
Okay, great.
I will just remind everybody to turn off your videos and mute your microphones. Thank you.
All right, we're back and we're gonna give it over to Ryan Daly, Operations Transition Team Manager, for his update.
Thank you, Chair McCarthy. So I'm going to be fairly brief with this update. You received the staff report on the recreation reset update. It was pretty comprehensive and shared the work we've been doing over the last month, and that's sort of what I want to talk about briefly tonight. Where we left off in June was a lot of preparation work to where we are today. Staff was busy preparing the community center and the grounds for summer camps and community usage of the facility. If you've been by the community center, it actually looks much different than it did 2 or 3 months ago, when it was completely overgrown and just frankly in terrible shape. We have a landscape crew that came in and beautified that area. They just put fresh chips down. It looks great. What we've done is we've started offering our summer camps, obviously, this summer as part of the immediate action plan within the recreation reset, and it's gone fantastic. I mean, we have 1,100 kids taking part in camps, both in the community center and in our parks, going very well, minus one day, and that was Monday, because it was over 100 degrees, and we made the smart decision, and our contractors made the smart decision to cancel programs that day for any of the outdoor programs, or outdoor camps, I should say. So that just looks fantastic. It's a great entry point, I think, for us as we're opening up the community center. So we're seeing progress there. Another update would be us working on the immediate action plan for the Arts Council. As I've spoke with the commission before, we're working on the Mostly Music in the Park series that'll take place late August, early September. We're on track there. We have 2 of the 3 bands committed at this point, and I'll be releasing dates and promotional materials soon on that. Additionally, with the Arts Council, we're working on what it will look like to open up the gallery that hangs in the community center. Some of you may remember the red walls that were in the community center where the art gallery hung. Well, they're gray now. We had painted them just prior to the pandemic hitting and us closing the doors. So we're ready to start hanging things in there. We just need to get to a spot in sometime probably in this fall where we're going to have a process, and we're going to be able to work with some local artists to hang artwork on those walls and have some different displays and viewings happening. So that's another aspect of us starting to move forward there with the community center. One of the key elements that staff's been working on over the last month, actually the last couple of weeks, is recruiting for open positions. We have a recreation coordinator position open that we're reviewing applications on right now, as well as a number of community center casual labor positions for our front desk. And I'll tell you that those front desk positions, we need about 5 of them to open up to the full slate of hours we were looking for beginning in late July. I will share with you tonight, it's a challenge. We're seeing very limited applications. We do have a pool of applicants that we're going to move forward with and try to get them in here. But we do have some challenges around the number of positions we need to hire versus the number of applicants. So I will keep you up to date on that as we move forward, probably through email over the next month, just so you know where we are in this opening process for the community center, which would be moving forward with. Those staff would be key in us delivering our drop-in programs in the gym, as well as the gym rentals. So that's something we really want to move forward with. Traditionally, so that the commission knows, gym rentals have been rather slow in past years during the summer, but once you hit that October date, late September, that's when it starts to get full. Kind of coincides with school and athletics and whatnot for volleyball and basketball. So that's really the goal for us, is to be fully operational by the fall, or able to accommodate those gym usages. Big news, picnics. We have an online service now that we implemented last week. Previously, staff would receive a phone call. We'd go through a list. We'd try to figure out what worked. It's all self-service now. It's working fantastically. We actually have 10 bookings within the last week for those picnic shelters. I'll remind the commission that we had one of those shelters is unusable at the lid due to fire damage. So to have that number, 10 registrations through an online system that's requiring that we weren't even receiving calls or questions on how to use is just fantastic. And I think it shares the direction we're going as a department to be a little bit more, I'll say a lot more user friendly, as well as cutting back on the staff resources that it may take to implement those different items. And we're looking at that for facility rentals in the community center as well as other park spaces and events. The other item we've been working on is event permitting. Some of you may have been aware of the MIPA carnival that occurred. That was sort of our first event that the Parks and Rec department had any hand in. Outstanding turnout, worked really well. It took place in the parking lot at the community center. Great partnership with MIPA, the preschool association, and that really kicked off our process to where we are right now. And so we're currently accepting event requests for third-party events in select areas of parks, of certain parks. So we have put some restrictions, as in no food trucks, no access to electrical generators, that kind of thing, to limit where we are and what we're able to accommodate in 2021. So this is sort of our first step into taking a larger step into the following year. The other thing I would mention is that community collaboration and partnership was really a key element that came out of this last couple of months. And so we do have staff working with a couple of our community partners. There's an all-island picnic, as well as the pumpkin walk, if you're familiar with that event, to ensure that those are able to continue into starting this summer and going into the fall. So we're starting to reach out and work with some different organizations on meeting their event needs, as well as what it looks like to partner with the city. And then I would just say the last thing, and this is really something we haven't gotten to yet, but we're starting to have these conversations with some of our summer camp providers and other activity providers, is those outdoor program offerings that we're going to be looking at toward the fall. Fishing programs, possibly kayaking, different preschool aged activities, mixed aged activities that'll take places in the parks this fall, more than likely on weekends and whatnot. So that's something that we're working toward and starting to get our ducks in a row, so to speak, to make that happen. Looking forward to it. I think there's a need. We're seeing it with summer camp. There's a want for people to get outdoors. Our outdoor summer camps, they're all full. There's really not much of a chance to get into them. So we know that that's a niche that we can really move forward with and a want from the community. And so we're gonna really lean into that as we come out of summer and into fall. The other update I want to give is, and this was included in your packet, is the updated fee schedule, and that's finalized now. We've been sharing that with the public, actually, with individuals wanting to run events or things like that. It shares all of our fees for the programs and services that we're currently offering. It's been actually well received. All of our information is in one place. It makes it much easier. And you know, the development of that process was applying the pricing strategy, obviously, as well as the cost recovery targets. So that's something that we're going to continue to evaluate. Those are the fees as we continue through 2021, but we're going to keep an eye on those, and we're going to adjust depending on what the cost recovery targets need to be continuing forward, and also on participation rates and what our volume of usage is. So all of those are sort of indicators that we'll utilize for potential changes as we go into 2022. And we're starting to develop those fees for 2022 at this time. So next steps, where do we go from here? We're off to a great start this summer. Our next step is we're going to City Council on the 6th with the Recreation Reset Plan and all of the feedback that the commission's put forth and what's included in that. And we're going to ask for the acceptance by the City Council. Also included in that meeting is we're going to be discussing the preview for 2022. And that's the slate of services and programs that the Parks Commission had discussed leading into this meeting, as well as what was discussed at our joint study session, if you recall back in April with the City Council. So we're going to move through that. And part of that is also an estimate range for a budget. We're going to receive their input and feedback, and staff plans to return to the Parks and Recreation Commission probably in September. And I'll talk a little bit later about the September date, but we'll be coming back and we'll be taking any direction that the City Council gave us and discussing that with the Parks Commission. So we'll look forward to moving forward with that process and firming up our plans for 2022, which I'll just say, I think it's a large step for us right now, which is great. It's starting to really open that community center. It's driving, getting that economic engine running so that we can start to get people through the doors, start to offer more programs and services. So looking forward to that. Emily, if you're on, if you have any additional items of input, I will pass it back to Chair McCarthy.
None from me. Good job.
Thank you, Ryan. Does anybody have any questions or comments? I am seeing none. So let's go on to the fourth item of business, which is the division's differential pricing policy. And we're going to welcome back Ryan Daly and consultant Emily Moon.
Well, I just went quick, so I'm going to pass it straight to Emily, and I'm going to try to keep us on time schedule here tonight. So to you, Emily.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to share my screen. We'll get right to it. All right, how we looking? Good. Okay, fantastic. Okay, tonight we're going to talk differential pricing policy. All of you will remember that we had a really long list of policies that we intended to get into alignment with the new recreation reset strategy. And we're ticking them off one by one, starting with one that's very important as we look to 2022 and start thinking about things like the 2022 fee schedule. So we had a brief introduction to this in March. Again, this is just a way of us determining what to charge for different programs and activities within the department. Tonight's purpose is to share with you a draft of a differential pricing policy, get your input on that, and then kind of talk about where we go from there. It is not meant to be a night where we rewrite as a committee the policy, or where you all take action on it to actually adopt it and move it forward to the City Council. Just want to get your feedback on it. We'll work to incorporate any of that feedback. I anticipate bringing it back to you probably in September, since I think you're going to take August off, along with another policy that fits nicely with this one. And that's a policy that deals with facility use allocation. So how is the community event center used, by whom, to what degree? All of that fits in, of course, with your conceptions about revenue. So these do fit together. Okay, so the purpose of this policy is to determine what the city will charge to individuals or groups for services and programs that are rendered by the division. And as I said before, we're doing this now because the plan that we set forward needs to be in alignment with all future policies and practices. So the strategy has this big, broad statement here. I'm not going to read it to you, but I want you to keep this quotation in mind as we start talking about the different components of the draft policy. This is our aim. This is what we're trying to do with this part of the pricing strategy. So I want to quickly review what the current practices are. We talked about these in March, mainly for Sarah's benefit, therefore. Want to remind all of you that currently there is a residential discount residents receive a discount of 15 to 20%, depending on the program. Not all programs, but many programs. There's a senior rate that also exists for a few additional programs. And then on the facilities side, residents and nonprofits have a different rate than a third group, which is just labeled as the general renter group. On the field side, there's also some differential pricing. There's different rates varying by the age of the participant in the program that is renting that field. And in March, we also talked about what are the types of differential pricing. So the city's practice, some degree, is linked to age of participant or user. And in some places, it's linked to whether they're a resident or not. But there are other reasons or other ways that you can approach differential pricing. And I've listed those here at the bottom of this slide. I think this draft policy attempts to address a few of these additional items that are lacking in the current policy and practice of the city today. I know all commission members typically want to ask, what are others doing? And it is important to understand what's happening in the marketplace. So I wanted to share this with you. A quick survey of some of our neighboring cities reveals that most of them still have a discount for residents. As I said in the memo, sometimes that's a really succinct statement, and other times there's more to it. It's more nuanced, or there's a little bit more in terms of the requirements spelled out. Bellevue is perhaps the one city that is doing something very similar to what we have drafted here for you tonight. But I would say that we are seeing additional cities. Kirkland has had some discussion along these lines. Redmond has had some discussions along these lines, moving in the direction of eliminating some of their discounts for residents and trying to move their pricing policy in better alignment with some of their department goals. Seattle is another place that has a lot of different policies related to pricing. Very different structure. I won't go into it tonight. It's quite complex. But first and foremost, I guess I would say the thing that they're contemplating right now is how to make sure that their pricing policies reflect their goals on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I do expect that therefore their residential discount will become different than it is today. Lastly, I have a little footnote on this, just to remind you that even if Mercer Island might be contemplating doing something that's a little different in our area, it is not different from what many cities have done across the country. This is the trend. I'd say providing a discount to residents was something that really started in the 1970s. And many communities across the country, particularly those that are more focused on cost recovery and resource allocation and have more robust policies, are moving away from providing residents discounts for everything that is being provided by a Parks and Rec operation. Whoops. Mouse trouble. Okay. I'm not going to read all of these to you. You have them in your packet. I am going to go one by one through them, but I wanted to simply state there are about 7 components to the policy, and we're going to walk through them, provide a few examples, and we can talk through each of them. I'll start going slower and we can have some discussion. Before I do that, though, I wanted to make sure that we flash this on the screen. This is your cost recovery resource allocation pyramid. We will come back to this from time to time in our comments. So I want to make sure that we got it up here on screen. As you all recall, the pyramid sorts potential programs and services based on who benefits, and therefore some ideas around who should pay for those programs and services. So at the bottom of the pyramid, we have programs and services that are supported wholly or to a larger degree by tax dollars. And those are the programs that we think there is strong overall community benefit. At the top of the pyramid, we have the programs and services that receive little to no tax support. And the expectation is that the users, the participants in those programs and services are paying for the direct costs of those programs and services, if not to some degree, the indirect costs of providing those programs and services. So one by one, let's talk about what these components mean. So the first is fairly simple, just a broad statement to say that the differential pricing policy should have as its primary objective to support the strategy's cost recovery and resource allocation. That was the intent. You'll probably see this as a component of many of the policies that we're going to be drafting going forward. So as I gave an example here, what it means is that we're going to start from the place of analyzing the cost of providing those programs and services before we establish the price that we would charge for that. So we're going to go through the exercise we've talked about many times before of analyzing the fees based on market and competition, based on the actual direct and indirect costs of providing those programs and services. And then we will set the fee. And the fee that is set, whether there's a discount for one type of population or user or another, that fee should be set at a place where it is recovering the cost recovery target. So are there any questions about this one? Simple enough. Okay. All right. So number 2, we're going to target the use of differential pricing or giving discounts toward the programs that receive more tax subsidy. So what this means is that those programs in the lower levels of the cost recovery resource allocation pyramid, tiers 1, 2, and 3, those are the programs that receive more tax subsidy today. So your residents are already paying in to some of the costs of providing those programs and services. Therefore, we think it's reasonable to provide some level of discount, perhaps, to residents for those same programs and services. That's what this says here. And so I showed a very simple example. This might mean if you were offering a preschool program and you wanted to make it available to residents and non-residents, you would charge residents less than you were charging non-residents. But again, you would charge at least the minimum to recover the tier 2 target for cost recovery. Any questions on this one? Okay, very good. Make sure I can see all of you. One quick second here. All right, the next is that those programs and services, therefore, that are on the top of the pyramid, tiers 5 and 4, which are expected to recover all of their direct costs and hopefully also contribute to indirect costs. For those programs and services, the policy would state that residents and non-residents pay the same fee for those programs and services. Again, the thought being, in these cases, the assumption for these programs and services are that they would be user fee supported and therefore receiving less tax support, and therefore you may not want to offset that with a discount for your residents. So here again, I have another example. That's fitness center day pass. Someone comes in, they want to use the fitness center. And in this case, it would not matter if that individual is a resident or not, because the fitness center is in tier 5, and therefore there would be a flat fee for that daytime use. And these numbers that I put in are just hypothetical numbers. I want to remind everybody of that. So I see, Chair, do you want to call on folks?
It totally, whichever works for you, Emily.
I'll let you do it.
Okay.
Your meeting.
Okay. Commissioner Westberg.
Thanks. This is Commissioner Westberg, and I'm just looking at this, the wording of this, Emily. I was trying to understand. It says, I understand perfectly the concept that residents and non-residents would pay the same amount, but then there's the word unless in there that seems to imply there may be circumstances where they didn't, that in fact non-residents might pay less. Am I reading that correctly?
So that's part 2, and you are correct in what we're saying there is there's a possibility that you might have a program in order to make that program actually viable and available to your residents, that you may have to think about structuring the pricing in a different way. It's not meant to suggest that non-residents would pay less than residents. It's actually meant to suggest that the opposite could occur. And we struggled. This is a clause that you find commonly in these kinds of policies. I'm going to make up an example for you. Perhaps if you had a special event or trip where you needed to fill all the seats in a bus in order to actually meet the cost recovery on that activity, you might want to, kind of as an incentive, reduce the resident fee and hopefully still have it at a level that is cost recovery, but you may end up also charging non-residents more, thinking about what's the mix that we need to achieve here in order to actually tell the contractor to bring the bus to us, and off we go.
Okay.
So as a follow-up, so the unless refers to the equality of the fee, not the.
That's correct.
There may be times when you differentiate in order.
That's correct.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Commissioner Cohen.
Don Cohen. Yeah, I had the same confusion that Rory had on this, and I guess I hear what you're saying about equality on tier 4 and 5 from a cost perspective, but I don't know how easy that is for somebody who's a typical Mercer Island resident to understand. They're just being told, okay, if you to come in to use the fitness center, it isn't going to cost a non-resident more than it costs you. And to me, politically, that's a difficult sell, whether or not it makes sense from the cost recovery point of view or not.
Okay, thanks for that. Commissioner Stark.
Thank you. I think kind of following along the lines, yes, Peter Struck, along the lines of Commissioner Cohen and Westberg. So I'm thinking of an example. So let's say the city decides to offer a fishing program, and they've got 2 choices. They can hold it at Luther Burbank docks, or they can say, you know what, those are kind of busy with boats and everything. So let's call up the privately owned shore club, Mercerwood Shore Club. They've got a nice dock. Maybe we can use that. And so you make the call, and the Mercerwood Shore Club says, "Sure, come on down. We're going to charge you $200 a day for renting our deal." So in that case, there's no difference in operating costs or capital costs, as I would call that, because the rent, if you will, is being, which is kind of the imputed capital cost, is being put into the price. Whereas if you're at Luther Burbank, well, city dollars went in to build that facility or renovate it and so forth. And if you charge the same, fee for both residents and non-residents, I would say that are you really recouping that kind of capital costs? And I know we generally talk only about direct costs, but at some point, you should think about the capital cost piece of it. And so I'm just kind of scratching my head on that one.
Sure. So, Chair, if I might, what I would say about that is a couple things. First is, in our new model, what would matter is who you're offering the program to. So if, for example, it was a mixed age program marketed in that way, it would be tier 3 and therefore have a cost recovery target of 75%. So you would go into that program regardless of where it's being held, and you would analyze what those direct costs are, and then you would set your fees at that level to recover those direct costs. And then you would say, okay, since it's a program that lives in tier 3, and we have an expectation of some tax support, to the tune of 25% or more, then, or less, I should say, then in this case, it's appropriate for us to offer a resident discount. So that's how it would work for that example. And to your comment about recouping the capital cost, we can have another conversation about that. I think we did early on when we discussed the strategy. It is not the intent of the cost recovery structure or the fee structure. It very rarely is in cities to recover capital costs, with the exception being that there are sometimes additional fees that are placed, for example, on athletic field rentals, for artificial turf rentals, to help build up a replacement fund for capital assets. So that's one way cities sometimes build in fees for capital replacement.
Yeah, I guess thank you for that. I guess to follow up, I would just say that, for non-residents, there should be, or should be considered at least, that capital charge to say they are using the facility, and somebody's got to build that facility to begin with, absent the operating cost issue. So.
All right, are we ready to move on to number 4?
All right, here we go. Okay, so another common practice is there's different ways that residents can benefit from your policy. And one can be in how they're treated in terms of what they pay. And another potential benefit is along the lines of the access. And so to address that point, we've drafted a couple pieces in this policy. The first says that wherever it's feasible, and I mean that in a broad way, we have some work to do to make sure that we can put the practices and the mechanics, logistics in place in order to make sure we can actually affect this. But the city is doing this to some degree for many of its programs and services today. So we continue to think it's possible in the future. And in this case, we would provide an opportunity for residents and defined partners, we'll talk about that in a sec, to have better first access to reserving the city's facilities. They are Mercer Island's facilities, residents, and these defined partners should have better access to those facilities than non-residents. So what I would say about the TBD category of partners, we will be bringing you a partner policy, the facility use allocation policy, which will define those categories of partner agencies. But I've listed some examples of what those might be in the future. And so one example is we might wish to say that Mercer Island nonprofits should be able to use the city's facilities before a group, a corporation that works in Seattle, for example. Not a whole lot of other specifics on here in terms of like timelines. We probably want to think through what makes sense in terms of opening up facility rentals for residents and partners ahead of non-residents. It may differ by the type of facility that we're seeking reservations for. So with that, entertain questions.
This is Jody McCarthy. I just wanted to, when looking at the TBD categories, something that comes up every few years on Mercer Island is, of course, the field rental priorities. And that's been a problem in the past where there was priority given, but it was given in such a way that it wasn't fair for new groups coming to the island trying to introduce something new. So I think that's something that we'll have to be really cognizant about how it's worded so that it doesn't continually give certain groups favoritism and push out newer groups that are trying to have an opportunity to use the facilities as well. And Commissioner Cohen has a question.
Thank you, Don Cohen. That last sentence in the first paragraph, this is the same issue that Rory brought up before. I still find the wording of that confusing. And that's just my feeling about it. I still don't quite get it. There'd be no discount to residents who want to rent a facility unless we judge that non-resident participation is necessary. Doesn't if you need more non-resident participation, wouldn't you reduce the non-resident fee? I don't know. I'm just confused by that. And maybe it's just a matter of wording, or maybe I'm, slow to understand.
Chair, if I might. Thank you for that. We'll try to work on the language so that it is a little bit more clear. I think we're just trying to open the door, put a little caveat on this policy to give us the ability to make the pricing changes that we need to make in order to have full and effective use of the city's assets, and to make sure that those assets are there and available, and residents have the ability to use them on an ongoing basis. And so you're right. An example might be, let's take field rentals. Sometimes you have athletic groups who have a mix of Mercer Island adults and off-island adults that are wanting to rent a facility. We need to, as the chair discussed, we need to look at our field rental policy in its entirety. But you might have, let's say, a new program that there's strong desire for on the island, but because it's new, perhaps you have fewer island residents that might sign up, and it needs to have that non-resident participation off island. So perhaps maybe even for only the first year, you're offering some sort of discount to make sure that you get the overall participation that you need. In that example, you might be offering it to non-resident. I fully believe that the majority of the time you're probably going to be offering the discount to your residents in order to boost the resident participation and ensure that you get the total numbers that you're trying to achieve.
Okay, so this, Don, so that yet helps me understand this a little. So really, if I phrase this isn't good phraseology for this, but what you're really saying in that sentence is non-residents wouldn't have to pay more than residents unless we judge that non-resident participation is necessary, right? Under that example.
I think that's right. I feel like I need to make a little diagram to illustrate this. So
I think it depends on how you if you view this as a discount to non-residents, or you view it as, no, non-residents ought to be paying more, no matter what it is. But you can diagram the sentence later on.
That sounds good. And Commissioner Cohen, I think the intent was to leave the door open to the possibility that the fee might not be equitable between residents and non-residents on occasion when you have these circumstances. And whether it's the resident paying more or the non-resident paying more, it may depend on the circumstance. So
I'm okay with that as a policy. It's just that the way it is here, I kept being confused by it, but whatever. I think
very good. I'm appreciative of that feedback. Thank you. All right, ready for the next? Okay, so again, along the lines of access, this would be on the program side as opposed to the facility reservation side. The policy states that preferential treatment would be given to residents so that residents can sign up for classes, activities, and programs ahead of non-residents. And clearly, the place where we see this is most important in all communities that I have worked in is with youth summer camp registration. You usually have a finite number of slots and a lot of kids in your community, and you want to make sure that they get first dibs on your summer camp programs, but this would extend to other programs as well. So questions on this one?
Don, I'm assuming that you didn't put your hand down from the last one.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Commissioner Struck.
Yes, thank you, Peter Struck. I'm just curious. I'm in full agreement on the preferential treatment for residents. I'm just curious from a pragmatic perspective today. I mean, do we have the software that this is very easy to implement, or are we creating a lot of extra work for ourselves? I'm just curious.
The answer is yes. We have software that enables us to do this, and it is relatively easy. And the city has had this practice for some programs and services already. So I think we can do it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to the next. All right, so the next one again is one of those ones that opens the door a little bit to us so that we have flexibility to innovate and try new things. So this clause says that differential pricing might be used to incentivize participation. So either to drive the quantity of use, and so you can think about, instead of having a per visit flat fee for use of the fitness center, you might want to offer a multiple use kind of discount. We would also potentially use incentives to make sure that, again, we're maximizing use of the facility. And so I'm making things up, but maybe people don't tend to get married in November and you have an open weekend. And we think we've had some phone calls with people who are interested. And so maybe if we market that we're going to do a reduced rate on that particular weekend, we can fill the slot. And then lastly, we might want to use differential pricing to get people to participate in a new program, generate some interest. If it sounds like a low fee, or if residents are told that they can participate for half the cost of non-residents, that might get people in the doors and trying new activities, and maybe a catalyst for more programs and services in the future. Any questions on this one?
Commissioner Westberg.
This is Rory Westberg. So the way this is written, though, it doesn't imply that there would necessarily be a difference between the pricing that's offered to residents versus non-residents. I mean, it could be because what you're trying to incentivize is participation, and that
Correct.
Because the example that you give is focused on residents versus presumably non-residents, but a quantity discount, for example, at the boat launch or the fitness center or something like that, would presumably be equally priced or even available to non-residents. Is that something that
Yes.
is envisioned?
Yes, Commissioner Westberg, you're correct that the differential pricing wouldn't necessarily have to be along the lines of resident, non-resident. So those first two examples that I gave, I'm not sure that I said resident, perhaps I did. But in the case of the fitness center, if you wanted to allow non-residents to use your fitness center, perhaps a non-resident would pay the same amount for that multiple use punch card as a resident would, simply because, again, that's back to your cost recovery model. That's perhaps a more aligned practice. Full use of the facility, that example that I gave about the wedding, could be a resident, maybe it's not, because again, it's about filling the spot and just having the ability to say, maybe a weekend in June, the price is one thing, but that weekend in November, the price might be another.
Thank you for that clarification.
Sure. Okay, we're moving on. All right, and then this is the last one. This is also a catch-all and a bit of a reminder, is that the fees would be set in accordance with your strategy, which says we have targets for cost recovery, and we are going to utilize data in order to set the fees. And so we're not going to arbitrarily decide that a program is a certain number because whatever reason. We're going to go through the methodology that we have laid out in the strategy. We're going to determine what those direct costs are. We're going to look at what the market can bear, what our neighbors are charging for it, and we're going to first and foremost set the fee so that we can meet those cost recovery goals. And that staff, just like the ordinance states, has the ability to set those fees. So this links those two ordinances. The other thing that I wanted to mention at the beginning is no one should take away from this conversation that if we move in the direction where there are some programs and services that no longer have a discount for residents, that residents are going to pay more for those programs and services than they do today, or than they otherwise would, say, in 2022. And this particular component kind of speaks to that. It says costs are what the costs are, and that's, you know, what the city is trying to charge. Any questions on this one? Okay, very good. So I wanted to wrap up just with some big, broad questions. I see that Commissioner Markson has a question, so I'll pause here.
Sorry, it took me a minute to raise my hand. I think Sorry, I was just curious. I know you said that you have software to do it and that you're poised to implement the program, but it does seem like tracking like the success after the fact or how things change over time. I mean, it just inevitably is more data collection than if you have a single price for a single program over many, many years. And so is that something that the software also takes into account, and will that information be available after the fact for the city council or the commission? Like how it's just making the decisions, like one time is fine, but in 2 years you'll want to change your decisions, right? It's a constantly evolving framework, which is good, but it just is more complicated inherently. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, so my answer to that is we're not changing the complexity. So because right now we have many programs and services, for example, that charge different rates. On the facility side, as we showed on the current practices, we've broken groups into the general user group and the nonprofit and resident group. On the program side, we often are charging residents and non-residents different rates. And in either circumstance, we are tracking already today whether a participant is in one category or another and what they are paying, and then the overall mix, overall revenue. And so we're already doing that work. It doesn't add complexity. And certainly we will have that data to be able to reflect upon and see if, one, our cost recovery targets are in the right place. Two, whether the fees that we charged were reasonable. We'll see that through participation levels, for example, or comments from users. And so we'll have the ability to crunch everything, analyze it, and make decisions.
Okay. And is that something that, sorry, this is probably a dumb question, is like it publicly available? Does it come to the commission? Does it go just the city like budget? How does that
Sure.
get shown?
Yeah, we anticipate bringing some of that data. We won't bring, I always liken it to, you don't need your water quality engineer to come and talk to you about, the parts per billion of every constituent in the water. You want the presentation to tell you how well are we doing in providing water that meets quality standards, right? So the level of information that we bring back to the commission will be slightly higher than the level of information that the rec coordinators might need in order to decide if the next quarter they should offer the same program or if they need to make changes. But we have committed to bringing back some overall data that will demonstrate how well we're doing in terms of cost recovery and how well the strategy is working on fee setting.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I should have started with the fact that I like the overall program idea. Sounds good.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, so these are our summary questions. We'd love to hear your feedback along these lines. Big, broad questions about whether or not you feel this policy is consistent with the strategy's overall pricing goals stated there. Do you feel it's fair? How well do you think we can apply it consistently and fairly? We've had some discussion about that. What effect would it potentially have on recreation participants and customers? That might be along the lines, I think it was Commissioner Cohen who talked about the political palatability of this. And then the last one is what effect this would have on the division's overall pricing goals and the strategy that we have developed together.
All right, so Commissioner Cohen has his hand up.
Don Cohen, yeah, the political palatability kind of permeates all of this, and people like Peter, I think, are closer on that issue. It just sort of strikes me again that some people are going to say, why do we Mercer Islanders pay the same thing for the fitness center as a non-resident and everything? And we can give all these explanations, but I don't know. But that's what you have a city council for. Because they're going to wind up making the decision on the policy and then the staff is going to apply it. So, but that's my only comment. Otherwise, I don't have a problem with any of it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Westberg.
Yeah, I'll provide sort of an overall answer, I guess, to all of those questions at the same time, which is to say, I think you guys have done a good job of pulling a policy together that is fair, that is consistent with our pricing and cost recovery strategy. And I think we ought to give it, and seems to be consistent both with what we've done in the past and with what other municipalities are doing. So to me, I think we need to give it a shot, try it out, see how it works. And then tweak it or fine tune it. I agree with what Commissioner Cohen said. The devil's going to be in the details. If all of a sudden residents are paying more than they paid before for the same program, or the issue of paying the same as a non-resident for a service that they're, at least in some respects, their tax dollars are supporting, will need to be available with answers for why that is the case. So yeah, I think overall it's a good job though.
Thank you.
Commissioner Strack.
Yes, Peter Struck, thank you. I would pretty much echo what Commissioners Westberg and Cohen have just said, that is it consistent and fair? I think that at this point, I think we've hit all the high points. They seem reasonable, but as I think Commissioner Westberg said, the devil's in the detail. I think we just have to be very agile and nimble and be ready to respond accordingly to how things go. And clearly the marketplace will tell us very quickly how well we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any more comments from you, Emily? Are we done with item 4?
We are pretty much done. The last comment I will just make is, again, to restate our intention on this is to continue to ruminate on what you have just shared with us and make progress on other policies that fit with this one, including that facility use allocation policy. Chair McCarthy, you also mentioned the athletic field reservation rental policy. We will be working on that as well. That one's a bit more complex because we also have to do some work with the school district to make sure that the policy is working with their use as well. And we will bring back at least one of those to you in September so that you can see a little bit more about how these things would fit together. I'm anticipating around that time too, we will have at least a draft on the 2022 fee schedule. And so we can maybe use some more concrete examples at that point in time. And then I'm also anticipating bringing back to the City Council in a staggered fashion each of the policies after you have blessed them. And so that might be that we go to City Council at their second meeting in September or first meeting in October with one or more of these policies if we make good progress on them. So thank you all. We appreciate your feedback.
Thank you. All right, the 5th item of business is Parks and Rec Commission planning and meeting schedule update. And we will go to Ryan for that.
Right, thank you, Chair. This will be brief. As I mentioned earlier, and I believe I sent this to all of you earlier, was the planning schedule for what it looks like through the remainder of the year. Obviously, August, we are taking that off. So I hope you all plan fun vacations for that week of August. You deserve it for sure. But then that puts us into—
You got to stay home to take the second survey.
I'm going to need you to do that, Commissioner Cohen. I'm going to need you to be passing that survey around also, but I'll make that request later on. But we will be, that September 2nd date is our scheduled meeting, Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, that is the last night for the Mostly Music in the Park series. And quietly, staff is planning a volunteer recognition event for that evening, in which I hope the Parks Commission is able to take part in. So I will be asking us to reschedule that meeting, and I'm going to reach out to the commissioners over the next 2 weeks to find out what dates may work in September. I also need to touch base with the city manager as well as our consultant Emily Moon to find out what our needs on timing will be, which might make more sense for us as we move into that fall period for that September meeting. So a little bit more to come. It's basically me dumping a whole lot of what ifs on you right now. Other than that September 2nd meeting, more than likely will be pushed out to a different day and date. And then we'll also be filling in some of those voids probably during the month of August as we look at November and December, which I can pretty much guarantee to you it's going to be wrapping up the pros plan and then looking toward implementing the 2022 plans for the recreation reset. So any questions? Seeing a whole lot of nothing. People are staring down at the clock, looking at 8:04. I appreciate.
I just wanted to express this is Don Cohn. I just wanted to express my appreciation for staff and whichever consultants did it to get the council materials out to us that you got to us before this meeting with the budget estimates and so forth. I know that was a lot of, crunch time work, and I appreciated it.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I have to put it back on you guys for the input that was provided after the last meeting. I think that helped inform that packet going forward, and it was truly a group effort on that one. So I will pass it back to you, Chair.
All right, our 6th item of business is department report and update from Ryan.
See, let me open and share my. Come on. Let's see. Okay, can you all see that? Thumbs up.
You can see a black screen, or that's what I can see.
Oh.
It looks like it's trying to load it or something.
It is running super. My computer all of a sudden started running very slow. Anything?
There, here it goes. It's there.
Okay. This weekend opened up. It was hot, as you all know. We opened up the community center as a cooling center. Overall, it was fairly well utilized. We had between probably 15 and 40 people on any given day. Temp outside was about 100, but inside, this doesn't happen all the time at that facility. The air conditioning worked perfectly. We've had a lot of challenges with it over the years, but it worked great. It stayed right about 73 to 75 degrees. People were extremely appreciative coming in. We did have a couple of younger children that came in showing signs of heat exhaustion, and it was a great opportunity for us to assist in those families that had that need. As we know, on Mercer Island, we do have a number of older houses, don't necessarily have the best insulation, and probably don't have central air. So at these kinds of times, it's great to be able to step up and help out. Staffs currently, we're reviewing how that all went. Any adjustments that need to be made, I'll just say we did receive some feedback on extending the hours. We closed at 8 o'clock. That may not have been late enough for some. We could have maybe gone a little bit longer given the temp range and how long it was sort of lasting over those 3 or 4 days. The other thing we heard and I just received an email from Jennifer Franklin, our emergency manager, is for pets. And what can we do to meet the needs of those pet owners that have legitimately have pets that are overheating in their houses when it's 109 degrees outside. I can't believe I'm saying that number, but that's a real challenge. So that's something we're looking at and making sure that that's something that we can address in the future. So we'll continue to look at that. The life jacket loaner station, you've seen this slide before. I just want to touch on it briefly, given the increased in boating activity and whatnot we're seeing out on the lake. I got a call from Marine Patrol today, and this is either good or bad news. I think it's good news. We were out of life jackets. We were down to only 2 life jackets hanging there. One, what that's telling me is they're using them. That's outstanding. Some of those jackets look like they'd been used a couple of times actually, which is great. So we were able, through the grant with the community fund and the help of resident Heather Kurt, we do have a stockpile of jackets, and we were able to replenish that supply out there as we go into this holiday weekend coming up. So excellent opportunity. Looking forward to implementing that at some of our other park facilities that are on the water. Summer camp, I already talked about this. Those of you who have had the one-on-one conversations with me, I'm literally glowing right now with how great this summer is going. As I mentioned earlier, 1,100 registrants taking part in the different programs. If you get a chance during the course of the day, pop by the community center. Let me know. I'd love to give any of the commissioners a tour of what's happening right now in our parks. But down at Luther Burbank, kayaking, full camps. It's just awesome. Such a contrast to where we were last year. Lots of smiling kids, lots of smiling parents, just some great partnerships happening this summer. We do have very few spots, so that the link is there if anybody is interested. I mentioned this earlier, but the Mipple Carnival went very well. Our staff played a role in providing some custodial assistance, as well as Kinlan Jackson, our recreation specialist, was on site throughout the day, helping them. Great turnout. Frankly, just a call out to MIPA. They run a great event. They're very organized. They do an excellent job, minimal impacts to city staff and resources. And the kids are just having a great time. So a shout out to them. They've been a great supporter, great provider over the last year. And I look forward to that continuing as we move forward. Mentioned this also, picnic and park reservations, 10 bookings so far. On the event permitting, we're still doing stuff a little bit old school today, where people are submitting a paper application or an emailed application, and we're reviewing that. We're working on processes to put in place with some forms, software that would allow us to have a more seamless process for the people wanting to book, or even the various city staff. We have about 5 or 6 city staff across various departments that touch our event permits and give that review. So that'll be something that we look forward to implementing. And as I mentioned earlier, we have limited or placed some restrictions on what's allowed, food trucks, generators, electrical access, and limiting the number of sites. And part of that is the impact on our park maintenance. It's also the impacts on our review processes and our limited staff right now to be able to accommodate those full scale events. And these are third-party events I'm talking about. Events like Mostly Music in the Park or others that the city is directly coordinating or in partnership with. Those we move forward with in our typical manner of offering an array of amenities or opportunities. So it's the third-party events that really feel those limitations. Luther Burbank Docks. I don't know if I don't believe we have informed the commission of this yet, but we received, Paul West worked on this, received the boating infrastructure grant, $39,000 grant for both design and construction, just outstanding. The city will be responsible for a 25% match. And what this does is it really pushes that dock project forward. I mean, now we get to start moving. Outstanding opportunity. the application was supported by the Friends of Luther, the Community Fund, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Recreational Boating Association of Washington. So I'll be asking Paul to come back at some point, probably in the fall, to talk about where we are on this. But pretty quick turnaround coming off of the subcommittee work and moving forward. So just a real good opportunity for us to get those docks taken care of, and given the usage over the past month, it'll be very welcomed. And with that, thank you. I appreciate it. And how do I stop sharing? There we go.
Thank you, Ryan. The 7th item of business is commissioner reports and work plan updates. So this is the opportunity for commissioners to briefly share experiences they recently had within a park or a park and rec program or event, or to receive information from staff and fellow commissioners regarding work plan updates or potential changes. Commissioners, do you have anything to report? Ooh, good. Okay, Commissioner Westberg.
Thanks, everyone. I know we're running late, and I'm going to just be real brief, but I just wanted to say what a pure joy it was as a grandfather to take my granddaughter into the community center a week ago Monday for her first day of Legos class. And it was so exciting to see the facility open and all the kids out there doing, their various camps, doing different things. And a huge shout out to Kenlon. He's just an amazing guy and a super hire. I hope we can figure out some way to keep him on board over the long term. But just really exciting to see the energy around the community center.
Awesome, thank you. Commissioner Strack.
Yes, thank you, Peter Strack. I just wanted to highlight on June 11th, maybe some of you saw, but there was a very, very positive article in the Seattle Times on Pioneer Park. I'll just show it here. And I'm just going to read the first sentence. It says, Pioneer Park on Mercer Island is one of those special Seattle area green spaces where even when you can hear the whoosh of cars over the bird song and the wind pushing branches, you feel like you've been transported into a verdant new world. And I thank Commissioner Cohen, because many times he at least reminds me the value of open space and being able to kind of escape into the tranquility of nature. And again, this article was very, very well done, and probably bring a few more people to its trails. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you. Anybody else? I am seeing no one else. So with that, I'm going to say that the next regular scheduled currently Parks and Recreation Commission meeting is September 2nd at 5:30, and there is no August meeting. The time is now 8:16 and the meeting is adjourned. However, as a reminder to commissioners, please stay seated until the city staff has terminated the Zoom broadcast. Good evening and stay safe and healthy.